massive, all-out war to try and subdue the enemy straight away. When the bombers took off, it was fire bombers first, then the heavy bombers, with fighter escorts for the heavy bombers. It was always at night. They'd fly across the English Channel, and they would fly up the left coast of England. England was total blackout. Ireland was neutral. So Dublin was all aglow. And so this served as the navigation beacon for the German Luftwaffe, the Air Force. And then they would turn over the Welsh Gower Peninsula and head straight for where we were in Liverpool's Merseyside. That's either side of this mile-wide river. And the first things they do would be to drop bombs on the fire bombs on residences and anything else to create a flare path for the heavy bombers to follow in. And so we got the first of the flares, and we got the first of the heavy bombs. In our kitchen, my father had built an Anderson steel shelter. It's about 6 foot long, less than 6 foot high, about 5'5" wide. And he built 2 twin sets of bunk beds, slightly miniaturized, for we 3 kids and my mother. And when the sirens went off, we'd race downstairs from our normal beds, and he'd race up the road to his hospital. Now that meant that for the first 22 months, we went to bed almost every night, not knowing whether we would survive the night. That shapes you. It shapes you so much that you don't talk about it. You can't handle it. That's why the World War II veterans never talked about it. They can't deal with it. When I had to deal with it, it took a long time. One of the things that happened was, in 1941, May 3, which Winston Churchill described as the worst night of the war, he was our Prime Minister, in Liverpool, within a 4.5 mile arc of where we lived, 1,746 people were killed, but 500 or more have to be buried in a mass grave, a common grave. And that gives you a starting point that you don't easily get rid of by talking about it. So I didn't talk about it until I was 65. What happened in 1941 also was my father's youngest brother, a pilot, went down with his plane. Then his next youngest brother was killed. And he, though exempt because of his hospital service, volunteered. He went off, and we went to live with my Scottish grandparents. And that Scottish grandparents saga is what led to this trilogy, Helen, that I've written. In that shift, so we were dislocated, we were known as evacuees. We were there for the duration until the war ended. And something happened in 1946, and I think the same thing probably happened in the United States. In 1945, 46, that hinge, the men came home from the war. Now we had been raised by women. Yeah, we were a generation raised by women for 6 years. And in America, it was true for 4 years. When the men came in, women had kept the place going. There was nothing. There was no thread to repair the back of the shoe. They got wire and did it. The supplies were short, clothes were second-hand, used, and light switches broke, they'd find a way to cobble them together. So it was a cobbled together world, but they kept it going. And when the men walked in, you watched the women reduced to second-class status. Immediately. Absolutely. Every household I knew. My 5 aunts and their sisters, their husbands, neighbors. My father had gone in late, he didn't come out for another year. And so I've always been able to argue the women's side. And I still do. Because I know how easily it is for men in a group to do that. The other thing that shaped me is that I was a member of a minority religion, Catholicism. And the Catholic Church, as I was growing up, had been banned for 300 years after the Reformation, and just the previous century, which was very close to me, in the way that this last century is close to you. The previous century, Catholics have been emancipated. But we were 8% of the population, there was still discrimination, and even to this day, a member of the royal family in line to the throne cannot marry a Catholic. Now all of that's eased off, but as a kid, it mattered, and it was hard. But when that church came back up, it threw up three great men, one called John Henry Newman, one called Cardinal Manning, and one called Lord Acton. And Newman was conscience, and Manning was the poor and the downtrodden, and Acton, good old Lord Acton, said something we ought to live by. And that is, power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that's immutable. That's exactly what can happen. And bullying is an element of that quest for absolute power, incidentally. So what was going on? What was I caught up in? What sweeps of world history were doing all of this? There's a movie called Hope and Glory about World War II and kids. And there's a teacher in the class, and she's banging on the map of the world. And she says to the kids, what are the pink bits? And one of the boys said, ours, miss. The pink bits on a world map then were the British Empire. It was a quarter of the world. 30 years earlier, when Queen Victoria had sat down with the Tsar of Russia, who was her nephew, between the two of them, they had controlled half the world's landmass. And this empire complex comes about with nations that are seeking to expand and to dominate. And Germany was seeking to expand and dominate. And that's what I was caught up in. Because, if you noticed, President Trump told Prime Minister Abe of Japan a couple of weeks ago, I've got your back. Right? The British had told Poland, I've got your back. And when Hitler invaded Poland, we went to war with Germany. And if China goes to war with Japan, America is committed to defending it. So that's what you would be called up in a very different way. It doesn't mean it's going to happen. But these are the sweeps of world history that we're dealing with. Militarily, and to some extent economically, post-World War II, the United States has built its empire in a different way, by providing half the world with shelter under its nuclear and military shield. And that worked. And it was 70 years, okay, then a few wars, a few invasions, a few mistakes. But on history's record, it's still not a bad record. Peace generally has been kept, and the nuclear war of the 60s didn't come about. And if there's anything to fear, fear nuclear. Nuclear war, nuclear terrorism, all of that. The problem with America has gone through domestically is economic. Prior to World War II, America could have been blockaded for decades because it had everything it needed to live on, except two rare minerals, coffee, chrome, and banana. It had everything else, but it sold all of this to itself too cheaply. After World War II, though, all of the other manufacturing nations were desolate. The factories were gone, America's weren't. So America became this great manufacturing nation from exports. And that covered up how it had depleted its resources. But then by the 80s, corporations found out all about cheap labor. So what they did was they shifted everything overseas. It wasn't just jobs. That's the key thing. What they shifted overseas was 180 years of American imagination, invention, and innovation and know-how. That's what the country lost. It lost its skill set. And that's where it is now economically. 1958, I came here for a year to visit my pen friend. My pen pal and I had written to each other for 10 years. He lived in Warren, New Jersey. He was an architecture student by this time. And I moved in Brooklyn. So America in 1958 was two very diverse sites for me. First was, I wandered next door from Clinton Hill, a section of Brooklyn, into Bedford-Stuyvesant. I was a white kid from a white country. And I walked into Bedford-Stuyvesant, and it was a party. I saw poverty, I saw the effects of racism, and among the white community, casual racist remarks and the absolute bigotry. I was stunned, I was seared. And that mattered, and that never left. And this is in a country that's hospitable, friendly, welcoming. And this was at a time when opportunity was there for everyone. There were more jobs than there were people. There was more opportunity than there is now. So after working for 3 American newspapers for a year and being fired by 2 of them, I went home. I did come back later, much later. Anybody here know who the Beatles were? Oh, thank God for that. All right, they were the pop group that led to pop. They were Liverpudlians, people from Liverpool. I'm a Liverpudlian. Just imagine the Beatles as boy reporters. And you've got a sense of why this next story makes sense. I worked a night shift on an American newspaper, and we had an editor, Albert Angus Allen, who didn't mind what you did when you finished work at about 2 o'clock with an hour to go, as long as you didn't read a book. You could read a magazine, you could write a book. If you were a woman, because there were women in the newsroom by then, you could bring in a simplicity dress and cut it out, but you can't not read a book. And he caught me reading a book inside a magazine. And he jumped up and down, and he was abusive, and he was nasty, he was very peremptory fellow to begin with anyway. And I sat down. I didn't speak to him the next night. But the night after that, I went up to him and said, Al, you don't care what I do at my desk, as long as I don't read a book. Right? He said, right. I went back to my desk, I opened my case, I took out my tap shoes, I opened my other case, once I got my tap shoes on, I took out my ukulele banjo, and I jumped on the desk, and I did a, not bad, but the time, shine on, and you're fired. I was 22. I learned at 22 there are other ways to protest, and being fired is probably not the best one if you're still looking for a job. So Liverpudlians, while they are gregarious and noisy and all of these other things, are also a bit slow to grow up. And I was a bit slow. Yes, and you've seen my stuff laid out somewhere. I was a bit slow to grow up. But I was matured because I'd married an American, and I was matured by America, and I was matured by the job I got. I was working on a daily newspaper, and a pal of mine at the Baltimore Sun said, there's an editor in Camden, New Jersey, who's doing the sort of reporting you're always talking about. And I went down to see him. He was a priest, a fellow called Saladavo. The paper was called the Catholic Star Herald, and I told him what I would do. He said, do it. And so I grew up. The Beatles, John Lennon, for those of you who know, wrote his first politically overt song when he was 26, called Revolution. I wrote my first politically overt articles when I was 27. August 63.